Alrighty. I've got Jon Hernandez. John, you are the CEO of not just one credit union, but multiple credit unions. So, just to kind of begin with, why don't you share your story, how you became a credit union CEO, and then how it evolved into multiple credit unions?
Thanks, Greg. As a small credit union CEO, or any CEO for credit unions for that matter, when you get a call from other credit unions, you tend to, in most cases, all of us would try to help. And that's exactly how it all started. So back in 2000, there was a credit union about a mile away from my credit union, also a smaller credit union, that unfortunately the CEO was having physical issues. And so there were times that when he's unable to work, and since it's a three-man shop, losing one would be 33% of the workforce. He would call on us to help him, his credit union. At some point, I would even end up having to run his board meeting because the day of the board meeting, unfortunately, he would get ill. And so I would go over there and run his board meeting. And unfortunately, he ended up passing away. So initially, when I was helping him out, it was just helping him out, um, going over there as needed, or some of my team members as needed. But after he passed, and the board had to make a decision on hiring a new CEO. They sort of were the ones that came up with the idea. They said, John, you've been helping us out. Is there any way you can continue this moving forward? Well, clearly at that point, I can't just continue to do that without
Sure.
involving the board. Not that my board was not aware that I was helping them, but this would be more of an ongoing basis. So
Exactly. So initially you were just helping them out. So you kind of got into being a fractional CEO unintentionally. You were helping them
unintentional.
out, and then it kind of evolved into it.
Right. So yeah. So I asked the board, and the board said, "Well, we haven't seen the difference. As long as everything remains the same for us, more power to you." So I started doing that in 2002, and then in 2003, there was another credit union that they were looking for a CEO, and they asked me to help them through that process. And so I went ahead and did that, and they shared with me the resumes, and it's funny because I tried not to. I told them not to put the names on there, but it was so easy for me to determine who they were. I don't know why that made sense, but anyway, I looked at it and then I just, by merit, I gave my recommendation on who I think will be the best fit for their credit union from the four resumes that they showed me. That was my share of what they asked me to do. However, after doing that, um, they they wanted me to continue to assist their credit union, and eventually, at some point, they ended up asking me to be the one to work at their credit union rather than the one that they were thinking about hiring that I also recommended. And so I told them, well, I already have two credit unions. I don't know that that's going to work. But I said I can ask my board again, like what I did last time. I always look at opportunities, or in this case, this issue where if the board says no, then it's no, right? But if they say
Sure.
yes, I even told the board that let's do this on, give me 100 days. Within 100 days, I'm hoping that I'll be able to tell you frankly whether I can continue to do this or not. Because two credit is one thing, but three was just was something else. But so that's how it all started. It became three credit unions, and it's been three credit unions since 2003. The funny thing is, the first credit union ultimately decided to merge with my credit union, so I was back down to two. But then in 2004, just literally a year later, my other credit union that I started my career with, which is Mattel, I started my credit union career in 1990. They wanted me to work with them, and I said, well, I just finished this three credit union setup. I'm down to two, but your credit union is a little bit bigger. I just need to make sure that I can do it. And obviously my board will be okay with it. Both my boards will be okay with it. And so again, I said 100 days and that worked out. So then it became three again from 2004 until 2013. And then the other credit union merged and it was back down to two. And then in 2015, another credit union called me and now it went back to three. And it's been three credit unions since 2015.
Okay.
So the multiple credit union has been a long time, from 2000 to today, but the three credit union has been a long time since 2003.
So when you started being a fractional CEO for the other credit unions, and I'm guessing they were, paying you, then did since you were spending less time at the your initial credit union, did they reduce your pay or
Yeah. So
feeling that you would?
I actually came up with that thought, right? Because to be fair, but I also need to be equitable for me, right? So what I did was I reduced my pay by 25%. So instead of both paying 100%, it was 75/75 of the market.
Okay,
And the other savings there was now my benefit, I only needed one benefit just so then they basically share the benefit. Does that make sense?
yeah,
So, like today, there's three credit unions. So technically, in our case, we decided 2020. I'm sorry, 40/40/20. The 40% is the two 40% is paid by the larger credit union, and then
okay.
the 20% is paid by the smaller credit union. So, but the 75%, and I'll just be honest with about that. That only lasted for a couple years. Um, I think on the third year or the second or third year, I can't remember that part. On the second or third year, when I felt that I was delivering what the expectation was, just like any other credit union, I wasn't afraid to say, I think it would be fair if I would be compensated 100%. So, and each board kind of have to look at it and make decisions. So.
Gotcha. So, John, you had said you're the fractional CEO for three credit unions, but four brands. So, why don't you kind of explain a little bit on how that is?
So the newest credit union that I'm involved with is Nikkei Credit Union, Nikkei, which is a credit union serving the Japanese community, the Japanese American community in our area in Los Angeles. So going into that group, when I look at the stats, they were about 20% loan to asset ratio, hardly any delinquency or charge off, and there were no fee income to speak about. So it was very hard to generate revenue for that credit union, primarily because the membership itself, number one, they don't borrow, and they all have great credit scores, and they don't bounce checks or pay any fees. So that was the group that they were serving. So then we had to figure out how we can sustain that, and the only way we felt that that was possible is by complementing that membership with another type of membership that is the opposite of who they are, meaning borrowers and hopefully at least will pay some fees, right? Um, so that being said, we thought about it and we said, well, but we still want to play the niche, right? We want to make sure we're only serving a niche group. And because they were serving the Japanese American community, the first thought we had was let's focus on the Asian American community. So when we did our first study, we identified that there are already the top five Asian community is Japanese, Chinese, Indian, um, Filipino Americans, and Koreans. Sorry. However, there were already credit unions for the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese. There were no credit unions for the Indians and the Filipino Americans. And then we identified that both of those Asian community actually are borrowers, and they will be more likely to pay fees. So then, with our resources, we focus on one, and that's one. We created a branch and branded it Mabuhay Credit Union. And Mabuhay is kind of like Aloha in Hawaii in the
Okay.
Filipino term. So we called it Mabuhay Credit Union. So Nikkei, if you go to our website, you'll see both logos. One of them is for the Japanese American. The other one is for the Mabuhay, which is for the Filipino American. And since then, we are now 75% loan to asset ratio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were
So,
negative earnings about 4 years in a row before we got there. And since then, we've been positive. A year after we took over, we've been positive, not because we introduced Mabuhay yet, but we did a lot of cut costs or cost cutting. But we introduced Mabuhay in 2019. Of course, COVID hit or pandemic hit in 2020, but we opened up the doors in June 2019. I started at Nikkei in December 2000, or sorry, July 2015. And so we had to do a lot of research. And by the time we built the branch and deployed that project, it was June 2019. But again, we since then our loan to asset ratio have gone up to 75%, and we've been profitable since then. So yeah, some fee income and interest income.
So the fourth credit union, which isn't an actual credit union, it's just a branded credit union off of the third one that you were running.
Right.
So you basically found a niche and built that into the credit union you were already running.
Yeah, because if you think about it, right, the traditional thought would have been like we would open up a charter and do all that. And we said, no. I said, you have to look at it from the member's perspective or the potential members. To them, they don't care if you have a charter or not. All they care about is this branch or this credit union is for me. None of those
Yes.
small details matter. And to us, we played it that way. We said, let's just make sure that when we built this branch, it's gonna have that look and feel that it's for them. So this background behind me, this is the history of the Philippines, and I hired an artist. So the branch, when you go into the branch, there's we sit we purposely have three cubicles, and the three cubicles represents the three major islands of the Philippines, and then the conference room, which is where this is at, has this big art piece that basically represents the revolution of the Philippines in the boardroom. But then the cubicles have the representation of the different islands. And then when you go in there, the clock has the American clock, the Japanese clock, and then the Filipino clock. Just little things that you make it where it feels like it's for them, and obviously the name of the credit union. So and when we opened it, we made sure that all the community was invited. A lot of the businesses, small businesses that are representing that community were all present. So, and that's what we did. And then when you look at the logo, basically the color theme of the logo that we added for the Mabuhay side of it, that is from the flag of the Philippines. So
Okay. Now, before we started, uh, we were kind of talking a little bit about one of your credit unions, and you were sharing that actually some of your staff, I think one of your vice presidents, you had said, is the vice president in that credit union, but a CEO in another credit union.
yeah, so our vice president is interim CEO for a smaller credit union in Los Angeles. And it's actually going on 2 years now.
So are
So,
they working like as a fractional CEO like you are with these as well?
right, right.
So
Clearly,
your
that is,
organization was already familiar with the fractional work, so they kind of already understood how that would go.
and that's not our first time. This might have been like our sixth time, maybe or more. We've done that quite a few times. Some of them were requested directly by a credit union, but a lot of them actually came from NC Way. They have contacted us and just temporarily helping a credit union. So we would go in there and help. And then sometimes it lasts for 3 months. Sometimes it's a little longer. In this case, like in this particular case, I think this is our second year doing it. I say us, but really just our VP. But every so often he would use some of our resources from our team. Like we have a data analyst, we have a facility person that we would use, which I call those luxury positions for a small credit union. But we have them because we share them with multiple credit unions. So
So this is actually a good segue into asking if you've got these positions that can be utilized in with other credit unions. So do you charge those other credit unions like for like a servicing like a service agreement? I know you can work like a service agreement or with through a QSO. So how do you guys structure that?
Yeah, so we make everything as simple as possible because the more complex you make it, the harder it is to execute, right? So what we do is as simple as we take the rate of that employee, and then we take that times 125%. The 25% basically accounts for the benefits and the payroll taxes and payroll processing of that employee. So let's just say an employee is paid, I don't know, $30 an hour. And so they needed that employee to help them out. And first, obviously, we need to make sure we have the capacity to do it. And how long is that relationship or that need, from that employee. So then we just take that $30 and multiply it 125%, and that's what basically the invoice will be to that credit union plus travel,
Okay.
right? The travel will be paid directly to the employee. The employee is not paid any extra for doing the shared work.
Okay, so that was actually going to lead into my next question because sometimes, and I've actually had conversations with another credit union that needed some help with some shared services, and the first thing that went off in the employee's thought process was, well, they were going to get a raise because they were doing added work. So how does that work?
Well,
I,
let
I
me
know
let me
some employees want more, or they
right.
feel like if I'm doing more, I should get paid more. How
Let
is
me
that?
let me clarify that. If it's a short term, meaning less than 6 months, there won't be any change, right? However, if it's going to be a relationship or an agreement that's going to be longer, then we have to look into making those adjustments.
Okay,
So in those cases, we would consider that, but you have to be careful with that because once you give it, you can't take it back, right? And
exactly.
and that agreement could only last 6 months or a year or a year and a half. And then what do you do then, right? So then it will be unfair to the host credit union is what I call it. So what you can do is during those time they can get paid more, and it would be extra, but their regular pay can go back to the regular pay. Now that's a lot more complicated, so we have to handle that a little bit differently when we do that, but there is a way to do it. So we, by the way, sign an agreement 6 months. So it's renewable every 6 months because we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to be out. They have an opportunity to get out as well without having to tie the contract. But the thought process is when we do this, it's at least 6 months to a year. We prepare ourselves for that. Because in a lot of cases, our experience is they say 6 months, but it never only lasts 6 months. Because by the time they're actually experiencing and enjoying the benefit of it, they're wanting to redo it again. And usually that's what happens. So, but we still want to keep the agreement every 6 months. And we try to keep it simple again. January to July and July to December, whatever, every 6 months. Just make it
Sure.
simple. And then the reason why we choose to do it in July, to renew it in July, because we also do our merit increase in July. So that way, every 6 months, if we have to give the merit increase, now that rate, remember the $30 times 125%? Let's say
Yes.
that now becomes $32 an hour times 100. So that way, the host credit union is not being penalized because we're now paying that person a little bit more money. Does that make sense? Now,
Yes.
here's an example of how you could take care of that employee if that relationship is going to be longer than 6 months. It could be as easy as that differential pay. Let's use the $30 example, right? So let's say now that employee, you'll come to an agreement that during that term that you're working for the other credit union, assisting the other credit union, you would get paid, let's say 40, right? So then you would just that extra additional $10 will then become a miscellaneous pay on their payroll check, and or you can indicate in there support credit union or something, whatever you want to title it. But ultimately, as long as they're getting it in their paycheck, does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
Now, I'm curious. I actually had talked with a QSO that was started by four different credit unions. They had some positions that they could have somebody overseeing, and I know all different credit unions look at things differently, but I think they had some need for a collections manager and a CFO. And so what they did was they actually formed a QSO where they might have an accounting manager at one credit union where the QSO has the CFO. And so then the different credit unions, based on a pro rata share, depending on what they were doing, how much they needed. So did you guys ever consider setting up a QSO for that regard, or does it
Yeah.
just work the way
It,
with the
it
agreement?
it never got to the point where we felt the need to, because that's scaling at a different level. When we're only doing it two or three or four at a time, there's just no need to be for it to be a QSO, because once you make it a QSO, then you have to manage a QSO. That's just one
Sure.
other
Then
layer.
you've got added expenses and filings and audits and all kinds of other stuff that go along
Not
with
a, not until I think you get to a point where you're deploying more than a dozen of them that you have to worry about. Then maybe it needs to be a queue. So in our case, again, I'm operating 7 branches with 40 people, so I don't really have a lot of excess capacity to have to create another position for that. I would rather invest that position to where, like, a data analyst for my small credit union. That's a luxury position, but I'd rather put it on there. I'm thinking about a graphic artist, instead of using a third party marketing company, things like that. I would rather slowly build the infrastructure that I have rather than investing it on the queue. So that's
Gotcha.
just by choice. That's all. But not that I don't support it. I think it's a great idea. I just don't think we have the scale to warrant that. So
Sure. Well, and it seems like it's beneficial for everybody. The credit unions, each individual credit union, ends up paying a little less than what they would be paying for the full time CEO, yet they're getting the benefit of having a CEO to take care of everything that the CEO would be taking care of.
right, and even conferences and a lot of other CEO expenses, all those are split up, by the credit union. So again, from an initial basis, I think, to be fair to the credit union and to the CEO, yeah, he or she doesn't have to get paid 100% on each one, but eventually they could. That's as long as they can prove that they can do the job. So,
Now, just kind of finishing up, I know we've gone longer than I was expecting. Some of the technical difficulties when we first started, but
or
with the credit unions that you've been on, um, when you first got started, you kind of were at the 75-75, and then you went 40-40-20. Is that kind of worked for everybody?
so the 75/75 is the compensation. The 40/40/20 is the benefits, right?
Okay.
So those are two different things. But I mean, so far it's been like that for quite a while. So I think ultimately, you look at the profitability and you look at the operations, as long as all of those are in line, I think, right? So
Now, this is probably more CEO to CEO and the other CEOs out there listening. How is it dealing with three different boards and going to three different board meetings and all of that? Just finishing up, how has that been?
well, I try not to overthink a lot of things. I just kind of do what's presented to me. So yeah, I do have three separate boards, and this strategy is not necessarily the same for all three. They're actually all different. One focuses on healthcare and city workers, so frontliners, and then one focuses on, I mentioned earlier, the Japanese and Filipino community, and then the other one is a toy company, Mattel Toys. So their membership are completely different. Therefore, you can't really have the same strategy. But a good percentage, maybe 2/3, if not higher, of the things that we do are the same. So we have a lot of format that are similar, but it's different in their own sense. Even if you go to our websites, you can see the similarity, but they're different. Does that make sense? Like, the format looks the same, but then one focuses, you can tell they're focusing on healthcare. The other one is focusing on community. The other one is kids because it's a toy company. But the format, you can sense that they're the same but different. So, in a sense, um, it's even with the board, it's the same way. They don't have a lot of the regulations sort of apply to them, right? And a lot of the what's happening in the environment all applies to the all three boards, but the way we have to address them are different. Um, Nikkei is actually a state credit union, whereas the other two are federally chartered credit unions. So just recently in California, we had to reduce our ODP fees from whatever you're charging, and the maximum that we can charge is $14. So most of us were charging 25 and above. So you can just imagine the impact on the balance sheet or the income statement on that. But Mattel and Calcom didn't have to worry about it while Nikkei had to. So therefore, they had to strategize a little bit different because that's an impact to them. So, I mean, it's just a meeting. That's the way I look at it. I try to run the
Yeah.
meeting an hour max each board meeting. I provide them all the information as much as I could, at least 3 days before the board meeting, so hopefully they can digest it. When we bring on a new board member, I spend about an hour with them, sort of going through the board packet, just so that they're familiar with the board packet. Because once during the board meeting, I don't go through all the pages, but I usually focus a lot on the financials and then also any of the board action memos that we need to discuss. But otherwise, it's between a 45 minute to an hour meeting for the board meetings. I also have three ALCOs, supervisory committee meetings, and then again, Nikkei being a state credit union, not only we have we have the state examiners. We also have the NCUA examiners. So technically, it's 4 exams, but you just go through that process.
Jon Hernandez, it definitely sounds like you're earning your money being CEO of three different credit unions. One final question, or I guess for you to share with any credit union CEOs that might be thinking of helping out other credit unions or being part of some type of fractional CEO with another credit union. Do you have any tips to give them in what they might be getting themselves into?
Keep it very simple. I've actually have communicated or spoke to several CEOs out there that was thinking or tried to do it, and I've always told them just keep it simple. Don't make it complex or don't make it difficult, because to me that's how it would work. And be very organized with your schedule. I told you from the beginning, I go to one credit union on Mondays, another credit union Tuesday. Those little tricks makes a big difference because you set the expectation. My board meetings for Calcom is on Monday. I am at Calcom on Monday. My board meetings at Nikkei is on Tuesday. I am at Nikkei on Tuesday. When you start creating those things, it becomes a norm and everybody gets used to what the norm is. You have to create that norm, but you have to make it simple. The more complex you make it, the harder it's going to be for you and for everybody else.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jon. I really appreciate getting your insights, and I look forward to networking with you.
Take care.
Thank you.